I divorced the man I had been in love with for 10 years in the 7th year of secretly loving Eric. He said to me, let's get married. In the 3rd year after getting married, I said to him, let's get divorced. Chapter 1. In the 10th year of loving Eric, I brought up the topic of divorce. It all started when he didn't come home after work. I drove to his company to find him and saw him standing with a girl outside the building. I recognized her immediately as his ex-girlfriend who had been involved with Eric for 5 years. They stood on the steps, Eric looking handsome in his suit, and the girl with her wavy hair appearing charming and affectionate. Although they didn't hold hands or embrace, there was an intimacy that kept others at bay. I glanced at our chat history. The last message I sent him was, "Are you coming home for dinner tonight?" He never replied. He had been ignoring my messages for a while now, always claiming to be busy, but apparently he wasn't too busy to chat with another girl. I didn't approach them. I just stood there quietly observing. Eric's smile seemed unfamiliar to me. It suddenly dawned on me that he hadn't genuinely smiled at me for a long time. Despite being the closest of spouses, he always came home with a cold expression on his face. I thought it was because he was tired from work, but it turned out that I wasn't the one who could make him smile anymore. He glanced at me casually and his expression froze. Then he said something to the girl. Her smile faded and she waved at him before looking at me and walking away. Eric walked over briskly, opened the car door, and sat in the passenger seat with a furrowed brow. "What are you doing here?" he exclaimed. I replied calmly, "I came to pick you up after work. Didn't you say you wouldn't let Jenny into our company?" Eric's brow furrowed even more. "Jenny is a Yale graduate and has worked in Wall Street investment banking for years. Where else can you find someone like her? Why wouldn't I let her come?" He grew impatient. "Can you stop having only love and romance on your mind all the time? Look at what she's become now. Multiple companies are fighting to hire her. If it weren't for my connection with her, she might not have come at all." His disdain was evident in his words. I looked at the flowing cars in the distance without saying a word. When we arrived home, Eric didn't speak to me either. He slammed the study door shut with force. He was angry. He didn't realize that he only used anger as a cover-up when he felt guilty. Perhaps only I, who had been by his side for 10 years, could understand him in this way, but sometimes I hate myself for understanding him so well. It's better to be confused than to be painfully aware. Neither of us spoke first, and I didn't create a scene as I usually would. We just engaged in a cold war separated by a closed door. After a moment, the study door was forcefully pushed open and Eric, with a stern face, said, "What do you want? After all, I'm telling you, I can't dismiss Jenny. You either accept it or we get a divorce. Whoever leaves, we can both survive without each other. Diana, let me tell you." I interrupted him, speaking softly, "There's no need to dismiss her. Let's get a divorce." Eric paused. "What did you say?" He seemed to chuckle in anger, a hint of mockery in the corners of his eyes and lips. "Diana, I'm not joking with you. You've had enough. There's no discussion about Jenny. Don't threaten me now and come back crying later." He sneered like a dog. Eric always spoke without mincing words. The first time he argued with me like this, I cried in the room all day long, feeling as if my heart was breaking, but now there was only a faint pain in my heart, quickly replaced by numbness. I didn't argue with him. I took out the divorce agreement from my bag and placed it on the table. "I've already signed the agreement. The house goes to you cash and the car go to me, roughly split evenly. If you have any other requests, we can discuss them." Eric fell silent. He looked at me with disbelief, then that astonishment turned into anger. He grabbed the agreement aggressively and glanced at it coldly. "Fine, you've got guts, Diana. Once I sign, there's no turning back. Think it through." I handed him the pen. Eric's face immediately turned dark. He roughly snatched the pen from my hand and hastily signed his name on it, then threw the agreement in my face. "Tomorrow, we're getting divorced tomorrow," he angrily exclaimed. "Anyone who doesn't go is a damn loser." I nodded. "Tomorrow morning at 9. I've already made an appointment." He paused and I didn't say anything. I closed the door and went back to the guest bedroom. I could hear the sound of things being smashed outside the door, so I covered my eyes with my arm. How did it come to this? Clearly in the beginning I also wanted to be happy. Didn't give birth to me, nor did you raise me. You have no right to meddle in my affairs. If you can't stand me, I suggest you poke your own eyes out and stop looking." After saying that, I didn't care about the reaction on the other end and hung up, blocking the number. After some thought, I left all the WeChat groups related to Eric's family and deleted and blocked all their contact information, including his. After doing all this, I finally breathed a sigh of relief and lay down on the bed. Divorce wasn't as painful as I imagined. Eric always liked to threaten me with divorce during arguments. It seemed like he had me under his control, knowing that I wouldn't leave him, and he used my love to hurt me without restraint. And as he expected, the first time he threatened me like that, I was genuinely scared. He was right. I kneeled before him like a dog, admitting my mistakes, promising to change, and willing to do anything as long as he didn't leave me. I covered my eyes with my palms, feeling a damp warmth, but even heartache has its limits. Repeatedly that pain became numb through endless repetition. The chain that pierced through my bones and flesh, carrying rotten blood, finally left me. Now all that's left is liberation. Eric didn't contact me anymore. It's like he completely disappeared from my life until weeks later a classmate suddenly approached me and asked if I wanted to join the class reunion tomorrow night. Initially I wanted to refuse. I really didn't want to see Eric again, but then I thought it's not me who was in the wrong and I don't need to avoid him either, so I agreed to go. During the class reunion I was talking with other people when the door suddenly swung open. Eric stepped in. He was still wearing the suit he had on during the day, tailored and fitting with just the top button of his collar undone. Coupled with his black hair, he exuded a refined charm with a hint of mischief. Even without saying a word, his long-standing position of power made his presence dominant. Following behind him was Jenny, who was dressed immaculately. As soon as they entered, everyone started making a commotion. "Oh, Eric and the campus beauty are back together. I knew you two couldn't break up. It was such a big fuss back then. Come sit over here." "That's right, I remember when Jenny went abroad. Eric almost ended up in the hospital from drinking. He's been waiting for her all these years, hasn't he?" "When I married Eric, he said he didn't like formalities, so we didn't have a wedding ceremony. After marriage he never posted anything related to me on social media, and even when we went out together he would keep his distance from me. It's ironic that we've been married for years, but besides a few close friends no one knows we're together." Eric's gaze pierced through the crowd and landed on me, his eyes filled with mockery, a smirk on his lips. I didn't look at him and turned to talk to the person next to me. His face turned dark and he sat down with Jenny. "Why is Jenny back? I heard you've been doing really well abroad, planning to come back and contribute to the motherland," someone joked. Jenny brushed aside her wavy hair and smiled ambiguously. "Now that I'm this old I should start thinking about settling down. My family has been urging me." She didn't mention anyone by name, but everyone burst into laughter. "That's right, Eric has been waiting for you all these years. Now that you're back, good things are about to happen, right?" Jenny remained silent, blushing and lowering her head, smiling. "Hey Eric, you're really sentimental, but our Jenny is an independent woman now, both talented and beautiful. You two are a perfect match. But speaking of beauty, I think Diana is also beautiful." Back in our class there were often debates about who the campus beauty was, you or Jenny. I was about to speak when Eric sneered, "What good is just being beautiful? Some people only have love and romance in their minds all day long. They've become foolish as housewives. No wonder no one loves them." My face turned pale. I knew he was talking about me. When he started his business he was very busy. If I also pursued a career it would have been difficult for us to be together. For him I turned down all job offers and focused on taking care of him at home. Everyone fell silent, and then a classmate intervened, trying to defuse the situation. "We shouldn't say it like that. Diana also received offers from several major companies back then. She made millions from her university projects. I remember one company even offered her a salary of millions a year." "But why didn't you take any of those offers?" he curiously asked. "Did you get married?" Eric froze and turned to look at me. I lowered my gaze and calmly replied, "Yes, I married a scumbag. I rejected all those opportunities for him just so I could take care of him. But a scumbag is a scumbag no matter how much you sacrifice for them. Thankfully I cut my losses in time." A female classmate nearby empathized. "That's right, some men are like that. When they get married they want a nanny to take care of them. After a few years they complain that their wives aren't independent enough and end up with a clingy dependent woman. A trash like that deserves to grow old alone." The topic quickly changed and classmates began discussing their own relationships and marriages, warning against being too love-struck or else they might end up with such scumbags. I had always been submissive to Eric, so this was the first time I sarcastically criticized him. He stared straight at me, seeming somewhat bewildered. He wanted to say something, but his voice disappeared amidst the noisy chatter. The gathering came to an end and I got into my car to leave. As I started the engine someone knocked on my car window. One of Eric's friends looked at me with a troubled expression. "Sister-in-law, Eric's stomach is acting up again. Can you take him home?" I furrowed my brow. "What about Jenny?" He hesitated for a moment. "She offered to take Eric, but he refused." "Eric listens to you the most, you." I looked to the side. Not far away Eric stood at the hotel entrance, bathed in orange light. When his gaze reached me it seemed as if he was scalded and quickly averted his eyes. Jenny stood beside him saying something, but he seemed absent minded, furrowing his brow and waving his hand dismissively. "We already divorced." I withdrew my gaze. "I'm sorry, find someone else, sister-in-law." The man wanted to say something more, but I nodded at him and drove away without another word. In the rearview mirror I saw Eric watching me intently, slightly bowing his head, his face looking somewhat pale. I didn't look at him again and continued driving. I care so much about Eric that even the people around him know it. His stomach problem stems from when Jenny left and he turned to drinking. In these years I've transformed from a lazy person who couldn't even boil water to a housewife who can cook and make soup for him in various ways just to take better care of his health. I buy all his stomach medicine and divide them into daily doses, stuffing them into his clothes and calling him to remind him to take his medication when he forgot to bring his medicine on a business trip and had a severe stomach ache in the middle of the night. I braved the freezing winter to catch the early morning flight and deliver the medicine to him, but by the time I arrived he was already asleep. I stood at the door for hours waiting until my body was covered in snow, but when Eric woke up and opened the door he just frowned impatiently and said, "Give me the medicine and go." It was on that trip back that I slipped and lost my child. The pain gnaws at my heart like insects, not tearing it apart, but the subtle pain is impossible to ignore. Sometimes I don't understand myself either. I'm not this kind of person, so why do I become so lowly and pathetic when it comes to him? But emotions are irrational. They can easily destroy a person's principles. With one smile from him all my boundaries crumble, leaving me at his mercy. But my love has been completely worn away. That Diana who used to be so full of him in her heart and eyes has been slowly eroded by him. Anything to wrong you all these years? I don't want things to get uglier than they already are. Let's part ways amicably, I said wearily. Eric looked up, his emotions mixed in his eyes, and after a long silence he whispered softly, "You're not wrong. It's all my fault that we've come to this. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Diana, give me a chance to make it up to you. I won't be like this anymore." A hint of sarcasm appeared in my eyes. "Of course you didn't mean to. You just enjoyed the good I gave you while despising me. Eric, sometimes I really can't understand you. You haven't given me anything and you have no right to decide anything for me. You just took advantage of my love and kept hurting me while looking down on me." I leaned in close to him and whispered softly, "What exactly are you, Eric? On what grounds?" Eric's eyes trembled, his face pale as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. Faced with my question he couldn't utter a word, as if my words had pierced his heart like 1,000 arrows. For the first time he fell into a disadvantageous position in front of me, his back bending inch by inch. "Jenny came back. You clearly told me that you wouldn't let her into the company, and yet you kept her here. Eric, you were unfaithful to our marriage, broke your promises, and then blamed everything on me, saying that all I had on my mind was love and romance. Isn't this perfect now? I'll make way for you both." Eric urgently looked up. "Jenny and I have nothing going on. We're just colleagues." I smirked. "Do you dare to say that you have no intentions of rekindling old feelings? Do normal colleagues need to have meals together every day and exchange messages on their phones while holding hands? Eric, do you think everyone is a fool, willingly fooled by you?" Eric opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. I stood up and said indifferently, "I've said everything I needed to say. I hope you won't bother me anymore." Just as I was about to walk out of the door, Eric called out to me, his voice trembling, as if the person who had always been composed and arrogant had finally been torn apart from his facade, only now realizing his true self. "Diana, if I'm willing to change, can we still have a chance?" I turned to look at him and to my surprise, his eyes were filled with a hint of uneasiness. Eric had always been arrogant and dismissive in front of me, always in the dominant position in this relationship. I had never seen him so fearful before. "It's too late," I said softly and then closed the door. After leaving Eric, I started sending out resumes, planning to find a job. Fortunately, it hadn't been too long since I graduated, and the projects I worked on were impressive enough. Many companies were still eager to hire me. In his eyes, I must be worthless, not even comparable to Jenny. So, in this relationship, I constantly doubted myself, living in pain every day, questioning if I was truly that inadequate. But now, I realize that he doesn't get to decide who I am. I'm doing just fine. When I got home in the evening, I bought myself a small cake as a reward. In a few days, the cooling-off period would be over, and I could completely free myself from this relationship. But my good mood was interrupted by a phone call. Jenny's voice sounded distorted on the phone. "Let's talk." I looked at the cake in my hand, feeling impatient. "There's nothing for us to talk about. Don't you want me to stop coming to see you? Some things are better said and discussed," she said. Even though she was the one coming to see me, her attitude was still arrogant. I simply hung up the phone. The next day when she called again, her attitude had improved. "I just want to discuss some things with you. Just an hour. It won't take up much of your time." I didn't want to go, but I was afraid she would keep bothering me every day. I could only find a time to meet her. Jenny got straight to the point. "I don't want you to contact Eric anymore. Since you've broken up, let it be a clean break. Don't keep lingering." I looked at this woman, dressed in a white Chanel suit, her long hair elegantly styled, sophisticated yet professional. No wonder Eric liked her for so many years. You know that it was me who got together with him first. We had a good relationship, and if it wasn't for your interference, we might have reconciled long ago. Now that you're divorced, I don't want you to continue influencing him." I smirked. "I blocked him long ago, so where's the lingering connection?" Jenny looked incredulous. "Eric has been restless these days. If it's not you constantly reaching out to him, then who could it be?" "I've noticed that you people are really good at making up stories," I laughed and said firmly. "Interfering? Interfering with what? You two broke up and we got together. Is that considered interfering? Eric didn't marry me. Do you expect me to hold a knife to his throat and force him to be with me? Why don't you go ask him about it? As for what you said about me reaching out to him..." I put my coffee down and looked at Jenny disdainfully. "Rest assured you can keep a close eye on him. Since you like him so much, I'm no longer interested in him." Jenny wanted to say something, but suddenly her eyes widened. Eric hurriedly came over from my side and pulled her up angrily. "Are you crazy? Who told you to come find her?" Jenny's face turned pale, but she stubbornly replied, "What's wrong with me finding her? You two are divorced. Why are you still thinking about her? You were the one who told me that she has a boring personality, always revolving around you, and that you were annoyed by her." Eric froze, then turned to look at me. I nonchalantly crossed my arms. I had heard these words too many times and they no longer hurt me. Gritting his teeth, Eric said, "You're insane. It's none of your business what happens between me and her. We haven't gotten married. We haven't divorced yet." Jenny looked at him in shock, her eyes welling up with tears. "We were the ones who got together first, and you said you couldn't forget about me, didn't you, Eric? Have you forgotten our past? The past is already gone." Eric grabbed her arm tightly. "I have a wife. I have nothing to do with you." He stared at Jenny, enunciating each word. "I'm warning you, don't come looking for her again or I won't be polite to you." Tears finally fell from Jenny's eyes. She looked at Eric for a long time before forcing a bitter smile. "Eric, you're ruthless." She forcefully pulled her hand away and ran out of the coffee shop with red eyes. Eric pulled me out of the coffee shop. He remained silent for a while before speaking. "I'm sorry. You were right. Initially, I did have the intention of reconciling with Jenny. At that time I was young and couldn't accept being dumped. So when she came back, I always wanted her to see how successful I had become and make her regret it. I mistook that obsession for love." He rubbed his face and whispered, "Now I understand that I haven't loved her for a long time.